Okay, thank you, James. Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here today. I think we can start directly with the programs that we are going to see here today, and those are the ones that you are watching right now on my screen. Those are the programs that will allowed us to design our fire solution for our project. The first program that we are going to see today is the CYPEFIRE design. Then we are going to move on to the CYPEFIRE hydraulic systems, and then if we have time, I would like to introduce a little bit about the CYPEFIRE FDS and what you can do with all these programs. All of these programs are integrated into the AdriaBIM workflow, and that is why they can get the information and start the file using an architectural model using the IFC standard file. So, well, moving on to the first program, with CYPEFIRE design is an application created to help the designer during the process of designing and verifying the characteristics of the building and of the fire protection installations. This is the main menu or the main window that you are going to have once you open a software. The software, in the program we can create a new file, of course. The program allowed us to find any file that we have in our computer, and we also have a quick access to all the projects that we have been currently working on recently, and we have a little bit of documentation about this program in case you want to check that information. You have it here. And I have to say that I don't want to show you only what you can do with these programs or what you can get. I also want to show you the first steps that you have to follow in order to deal with the program for the first time. So when we create a new project, we have to give a name to that file, and the program allowed us to introduce a small description for that file. And due to the fact that this program is integrated in the AdriaBIM workflow, we are able to create a new project into the BIM Server Center by filling up all its parameters, what kind of project we are having, the view option, and so on. And when we click on accept, we are going to create a project into the BIM Server Center. However, we can also link this file into a project that is already created in BIM Server Center. For example, we are going to link this. We are going to get this the information from the project called Fire Example. We click on accept, and automatically the program will import or will give us access to all the files that we have in that project. In this case, we only have one file, that is the architectural model created by using the IFC builder, and we are able to import that information. And the information that we are able to import is the number of floors that we have in our building, and also what kind of spaces we have defined in the architectural model. And as you can see here, automatically in a couple of seconds, the program import all the information from that file. All right. These are all the steps that you have to follow when you want to create and to import the information from the BIM Server Center. However, instead of just to show you what you can do with this program, I want to show you a complete project with all the information, and just to show you a final result of what you can do. First of all, I would like to introduce the interface, because once you know how to deal with one program, I'm pretty sure that you will know how to work with the 90% of the programs that we have in CYPE, because they are not the same, but they really looks the same and have pretty much the same options and pretty much the same tools. As we can see here in the middle of the screen, we have the work window that allowed us to work with the model that we have imported, and we are also be able to introduce all the elements that are in our Fire installation. For example, we have up here, we'll see later, that the program, due to the fact that this software allowed us to create and edit the main characteristics of a fire protection project, we have all the elements up here on the top of the screen that allowed us to create that compartmentation of zones, limitation of external propagation, means of evacuation of occupants, protection facilities, signals, the access for firefighters, and so on. What we have on the left part, we have all the floors that has been imported from the architectural model in the BIM Server Center. We are able to swap between all of them, and automatically the work window will swap all those views, because this is a two-dimension view, and we have to work with that view. However, here on the bottom left corner, we have a 3D view of the model. So this is a view that we can interact with the model, and we can check how all the elements that we are placing into the building fit with the architectural model. So once we know the interface, how it looks like, I think it's time to start working and see the first steps that we have to follow in order to create the fire protection project. What I recommend here, when you are facing the software for the first time, is trying to follow all the elements from left to right, based on your needs, of course. But there is something that we have in common, and you will see later in the next programs, that is the general options menu. With the general option menu is probably one of them, I would say, the most important thing in the software, because here is where we are going to configure everything that we are going to place in our installation, and also all the checks that we are supposed to carry out, and what kind of building we are going to perform on the project. So before going into all those elements, in general option, what we are going to find here, there are some preloaded codes that we can import this information, and we don't have to configure anything. But in case you want to have a specific code based on your project, of course, and we don't have that code preloaded here, that is something that we will have to configure here, but you don't have to worry, because you only have to do it once in your lifetime, okay? Because once we have configured all the general options, we will be able to export this configuration in our computer, and after that we will be able to import the configuration in the future programs. So you don't have to worry in case you are worrying if you will have to repeat everything, all this when you are starting a new project. No, you don't have to. But what can we define in the general option? Of course, we have the first window, we have the general adjustments that allowed us to configure what kind of building we are going to have. So based on our needs, the program allowed us to configure all the parameters that we want for our building. Not only we can also have the design option, what kind of firefighter intervention we want to have, the occupant of the spaces, and so on. Of course, when you are doing this for the first time, this is completely empty. I mean, this is a project that is completely done, and the way to introduce all these elements is by using the tools that those are common to all the programs, that are the add tool that allowed us to create the new item that we are defining, or we have the possibility to edit the one that we have created in case we want to perform any kind of modification. So once we have defined the general adjustments, the next step that we have to do is to define the equipment catalog. Here is where we are going to define all the equipment that we are supposed to work with. It can be the ones that we get from our supplier. We can create and edit equipment for our own. It doesn't matter. You can. This is a program 100% customizable. And how you can do that, for example, with the fire extinguishers, you are able to introduce the reference of that extinguisher, a small description that this is the description that will pick up the program in order to create the reports. And also we are able to define all its properties, what kind of extinguisher we are going to have, what kind of what kind of properties that extinguisher has, and so on. And not only its properties, we are also able to change its symbol. All right, so once we know how to define all the equipment catalog, it's exactly the same for all the elements. For example, for the fire hose wheels, we have to follow exactly the same steps. We are able to introduce a small description, and after that, we have to fill up all the gaps with its properties. And we can define the fire extinguishers, fire hose wheels, hydrants, with what kind of hydrants we want. One more time, all the parameters. We are able to have standpipes, the alarms, what kind of alarm system we want to have in our building, the detection systems, what kind of detection system we want, its symbol, and so on. And after that we have defined all the equipment, what we need to do is to define all the checks that we want to carry out in our project. This would be similar to this would be all the parameters that would be completed if we have imported a code. But if we want to have a specific check in order to comply with a code, this is where we have to define all those checks. For example, with the zones, we are able to introduce all the requirements that we want for those zones. For example, with the fire extinguisher, we are able to introduce all the parameters that we want to check, what kind of properties of the equipment it's mandatory for those for that zone. For example, for the sprinklers, any kind of specific parameter, and also a description in order to get the final report properly. All right. We can define not only the checks of the zone. The program also allowed us to create safe zones with specific requirements based on what we need to comply. All right. The same goes for the stairs. For example, the program allowed us to choose what kind of requirements that stair is going to need. For example, the fire smoke control, what kind of communication between floors we are going to have, the checks based on its parameter, such as the width, number of floors, evacuation height, and so on. And also, for example, the firefight, the access for the firefighters. We are able to modify all of that elements. So once we have defined all the equipment and also all the checks that we want to carry out, following the rule that I told you at the beginning, that is follow all the menus from left to right, the next step is to start defining the spaces that we have in our building. In this case, the program allowed us to pick on the space of our project and define the types of that space and also its occupation. I mean, it doesn't matter with which element we want to introduce, because all the information that we are going to give to that element is going to be based on what we have defined in the general option. So, for example, in the occupation, those are the options that we have defined in the general option here. So that is why the general option is probably the most important part in this software. So once we have defined all the spaces, it's time to move on to the compartmentation. I also would say that compartmentation, it's one of the main elements in the fight against the spread of fire. With the compartmentation, we are able to delimit areas that may involve a special risk due to their specific properties. And for example, we are able to introduce different use units. We are able to define the different zones. For example, let me introduce a new one just to show you how easy it is to create zones, stairs, and all the equipment and everything with this program. Because with only defining its parameter, we click on accept and automatically we have that zone already created. And also if you want to modify its color just to check in our project if that we are defining the zones correctly, we can separate those zones using different colors. And the same goes for the safe zones, the risky zones. In this case, we haven't defined anything, or elevators or stairs. All right. And once we have all the compartmentation, it's time to assign this compartmentation to the spaces that we have in our model. That is why we only have to define what kind of compartmentation we want to assign. Click that compartmentation, and then go to the space, click on that space and confirm, and automatically, as you can see, the color changed. This is why this is the reason. I mean, no, let me rephrase. When we confirm, automatically the program will assign to this space all the properties that we have defined here in the zone. All right. So let me undo what I did, because you can always go back. It doesn't matter if you place something, you have make a mistake introducing or something, or you have deleted something and you want to undo, you are able to do that. However, now that we have defined all the elements, all the spaces in our project, now it's time to define all the elements for our fire protection project. The first thing, it can be the evacuation route. Is it difficult to introduce all these elements? No, it's not, because once you want to introduce any element, you have to follow always the same steps. Give the properties of that element, in this case the general data for the evacuation route, click on accept, and automatically the program allowed us to introduce all these elements in our project. And as you can see, I have created the evacuation route in a couple of seconds. The same goes for the evacuation origins, the protection installation equipment. For example, the fire extinguisher, if you remember, those are the ones that we have defined in the general option. So if we want to introduce any kind of element, we can select the type, click on accept, and we are able to rotate that element just to place it in the right place of our building. The same goes for the alarm buttons, that we can place it whatever in the place that is supposed to be. The same for the alarm system. We only have to pick between all the types that we have defined in the general option, and we have to place the elements in the project. The same goes for the same goes for the fire hose reels, detection system based on the one that we have defined. And I don't want to sound really I don't want to say every time the same, but it's quite easy. You can place it wherever you want. The program also, as I said before, allowed us to introduce the hydrants, and it's as simple as we did before. We only have to place this element wherever it's supposed to be, and that's it. Of course, with the signals also works in the same way. We click the signal, we place the signal where it's supposed to be, and with the rotation we are able to place all the signals that with all the elements and the evacuation route. When we calculate the project, the program will tell us if what we have created comply with all the checks from the general options or not. However, if you we also have the edit tool that allowed us to delete something that we have introduced, and it's a mistake because we want to perform any modification. We are able to delete all the elements. We are able edit all the elements that we have placed, and modify all its properties using these tools. And once you have defined all the evacuation route, you have placed all the protection installation elements, all the signals. The program allowed us also to create the access for firefighters. We can define the access road as simple as we did with the other elements, and we can introduce with 2 simple clicks of your mouse the access road, and also the maneuver space for the firefighters. In this case, if I want to introduce this space, remember that I told you that if something from the general option is missing, the program will tell us that we have to define this element in the general options. That is why we have to go back, create the element with a specific checks for that element. For example, 20 meters of length. We click on accept, and now we are able to introduce the space. How? We have to give its properties, and as simple as we did before, automatically we have the element introduced in our project in a couple of seconds. Of course, if we want to perform any kind of modification, we can modify or delete, just in case we want to modify our installation. Before moving on to the results, I want to show you the possibility to check everything that we have imported and introduced in the model using the 3D view. With this 3D view, we are able to hide or to show the element that we have imported, and of course we are able to go through the building just to check how all the elements fits with our architectural model. For example, in this case we have the evacuation routes. We are able to follow the evacuation routes. We are able to check how all the equipment fits with the architectural model, such as the fire extinguishers. What we have here, for example, are the exit signals, the fire alarms. We are able to go through all the building, and that's it. So if you want to check something from the model, you are able to do it from here. Okay, now once we have defined the fire protection project and all the elements, we are able to calculate and let the program to generate the analysis and also the reports that we are going to have. So how can we access to all those reports? Here on the top, we are able to get all the checks that we have defined to carry it out in our project. We also have the full project that contains all what we have defined in the general option, with all the information of the spaces, the descriptions, the names, all the element that we are supposed to comply of the code that we are working on. We also have all the checks that we have configured, and also we have the result of that checks, and also if that check complies or doesn't comply with the parameter that we have defined. All right, so all these reports can be exported into any kind of format. In case you need it, you are able to export into a PDF, TXT format, HTML. Feel free to export into any kind of format. However, the last report that I want to show you is the material schedule, because all the elements that we have introduced, the program will throw us a report with all the elements that we have placed. All right, and one more time, we have the possibility to export this information into any kind of format. So now it's time to move on to the CYPEFIRE hydraulic system. As you can see here, we are going to have exactly the same menu that we have before. In this case, we are not going to create a new file because you already know how to do that. But we are going to open the file with with the full project. All right, and it sounds very similar, isn't it? I mean, we have the same interface. It's pretty much the same, exactly following the working window where we are going to place all the elements. We have all the floors available to swap between them. Also, we have a 3D view of the model that we have imported, and also on the top of the screen we have all the tools available to introduce in our project. But do you remember, we also have the general options, and it's pretty much the same. I mean, we have not the same codes, but we have different codes in order to import, because I have to say that CYPEFIRE hydraulic system is a tool created to design the wet systems for fire protection using sprinklers and fire hose reels in accordance with the NFPA 13, the National Fire Protection Association. All right, and of course, this program uses the EPANET calculation engine. In case you are into the calculation engines, and probably rings the bell if I say that it uses the EPANET calculation engine. Anyway, the general option, just to create to design the wet system, we are able to import the preloaded codes that we have, such as the NFPA code, the European code, and so on. We have not exactly, but pretty much very similar, the same option that we have in the CYPEFIRE design. We have the general data that allowed us to define what kind of design option we want for our building, what kind of checks we want to carry out in our sprinklers, such as, for example, the maximum distance between sprinklers, the minimum distance not only from sprinklers, even though for walls and the protection area. We are able to introduce any kind of description here, and also its value for that check to carry it out. The program allowed us to define the project data, and also it's here with the design option. The program, due to the fact that we are supposed to design a wet system, design and analyze, the program allowed us to define what kind of calculation we want. We are able to swap between the Hasse-Williams calculation or Darcy-Page batch for the pipes and the wet system. All right. Once we know what kind of study and design we want to perform, it's time to define all the elements that we are going to introduce. We are able to define the sprinklers, the pipes, the fire hose reels, the accessories, the bulbs, and so on. But how can we introduce all these elements? Of course, when you are doing this for the first time, it's completely empty. But remember that once you have fill up all this information, you are able to export all this configuration to your computer, and then you can import back for the future projects. All right. So the way to create and introduce elements is exactly the same way that we did before, because we only have to edit or create a new one. Of course, I know that I have clicked on edit, but I don't. But the way to create is always the same. It doesn't matter. You only have to give its properties to that sprinkler. What kind of sprinkler you are going to have? What kind of orientation is going to have? The key factor, read type, what kind of response is going to have, and so on. The same goes for the pipes and the rest of the elements. All right, we have to define what kind of pipes we are going to have, and automatically, later in the program, we will be able to introduce all these elements that we have defined here using the proper tool. So now that we have defined all the general options, what can we do with CYPEFIRE hydraulic systems, and how? Following exactly the same rule that I told you at the beginning, it's going from left to right. So the first thing that we have is the supply connection. We are able to place tanks, booster sets. We are not only able to place all these elements, we are also able to define the charts of the booster set by a midpoint or by points. This is up to you. After that, it's time to move on to the main part of this program, because in order to introduce all the sprinklers, we have different ways to do that. All right. So the first one is to introduce the sprinklers manually, one by one, by selecting the sprinkler that we have defined in the general option, and also what kind of check we want to carry out on that sprinkler. So we click on accept, and we can introduce all the sprinklers manually. All right, one by one. We can define its operation area by giving a geometry, or we can let the program, based on what kind of protected area we want to introduce, we can assign that protected area to those sprinklers one by one or all together. Another cool tool that I would say this program has is the way to introduce the sprinkler using predefined patterns, such as the brown line, for example. And this is exactly the same window that we had when we were introducing the sprinkler. We have to choose what kind of a sprinkler we want to introduce, and also there is something else that is all the parameters to define that pattern. But once we have defined all that pattern, we are able to introduce all those elements all together, and also we have all the sprinklers connected with the pipes that we tell the program to connect to. The second pattern that we have is the cross main with branch lines. It's exactly the same window but different pattern, and it's as simple as this. And the grid system is exactly the same. So just with I don't know, 1, 2, 3, with 3 clicks, we have placed, I don't know, 40 sprinklers in a couple of 2 seconds or 3. It's quite awesome. And also, one more time, we have the edit menu that allowed us to modify or to delete what we have placed. And I want to show you something that, I mean, it's kind of amazing, I have to say that, because the program also allowed to use the automatic generation in order to introduce all the sprinklers into a space from the model. And I mean, if we let the program to introduce all the sprinklers automatically, we only have to pick what kind of generation we want to have. One more time, the sprinklers that we want to introduce in that space, and also all the properties like we did before. But in this case, we only have to go to the space, choose the space that we want to define to place all that wet system. We accept, and here, as you can see, the program has placed all the network automatically in that space, and the only thing that is left is to connect the network and to connect to the supply connection, and that's it. This would be the how to place all the sprinklers. The same goes for the fire hose wheels. I mean, in this case, I don't have any fire hose wheel, but if we create a new one, the way to introduce this element is as simple as this. I mean, just place the element wherever it is supposed to be, and you will have the fire hose wheel created. Now that we have created our installation, it's time to calculate. So when we analyze our wet system, the program will tell us if has find an error or something that generates an error. But in this case, we have performed the calculation correctly, and the program allowed us to, of course, to get a graphical analysis of the results of the calculation, such as the flow, velocity, pressure loss, and if we click on accept, the program will launch that information in case we want to perform any kind of study, specific study, and improve our installation. For example, with the flow, we are able to see where the flow that goes through all the pipes and get that information in a visual way. Like in the CYPEFIRE design, we have the 3D view that allowed us to check the model in a 3D view. We also are able to get the graphical analysis in the 3D view, and we are able, hey, hold on, there we go. We are able to check all the sprinklers, all the pipes, and all the nodes of the hydraulic network. So and another cool thing that this program has is that we can activate the spray pattern and check how the sprinklers work. All right, so that's it. This is the CYPEFIRE hydraulic system, but there is only one thing left, that are the reports. That the way to get all the reports is exactly the same. We have the project and the material schedule. With the project, we are able to get the hydraulic analysis. We are able to get all the nodes that we have in our hydraulic network, with what kind of network we are getting all this information that can be a sprinkler, a tank, a booster set, and also the properties of that node, such as the pressure and also the flow. And the same goes for the pipes. With the pipe, we have all its properties, such as the flow, velocity, the pressure that goes through that pipe, the friction factor, and of course, we can export these reports into any kind of format. And the last but not least is the material schedule that contains all the equipment that we have placed in our project. And we have a few minutes left, and I want to show you the CYPEFIRE FDS, and this is why I have prepared here. I have a video just to show you the what we can do with the with CYPEFIRE FDS, because the main task of this webinar is not show you CYPEFIRE FDS, because this is like out of the way. It's a huge program that it would take more than an hour to show you this program, but I want to show you the OpenBIM workflow, how it works. In this case, we are having the IFC file we are uploading into the BIM Server Center. Then we are moving on to the CYPEFIRE hydraulic system. We are creating our wet system, and then we will export this file into the BIM Server Center. And with the CYPEFIRE hydraulic system, with the CYPEFIRE FDS, we will be able to read all this information and perform the design of the simulation of fire with this program, because CYPEFIRE FDS is an application for the design of complex building models, just to carry out simulation of fire evolution using the Fire Dynamic Simulator developed by the National Institute of Standards and Technology from USA. This is a tool that allowed us to introduce all the elements that we want to perform for the fire simulator. We are able to introduce the materials that are in our building, all the surfaces. We are able to introduce what kind of reaction we are going to have in our building, and we will be able to check how how goes the fire through the time. We are able to introduce any kind of obstruction, the temperature, the sprinklers giving properties, and once we have defined all those elements, we can launch the simulation and check the analysis. And here, this would be the final result of how the smoke of the fire goes through the building, and also how the sprinklers works in that simulation. That blue color is the water of those sprinklers. We are able to get the graphical analysis of the temperature through the x-axis and y-axis. Not only the temperature, we are able to get the visibility and velocity of the simulation, and so on. And this is the CYPEFIRE FDS. And hey, hold on. I think I have covered everything. I have to say that it has been an honor to be with you today. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.